I hadn't heard from Marissa in years when her wedding invitation arrived, cream cardstock, gold leaf, thick enough to feel like gilt. Inside, the kind of calligraphy you pay someone's assistant to order. Mr. Caleb Rowan, it read. You are cordially invited to the union of Marissa Ellison and Victor Langley. My name is Caleb Rowan. I'm 58. I live in Seattle, but spend more time flying than grounded. The founder and chief engineer of Rowan Flight Systems, a billion-dollar firm built from the bones of failed prototypes and stubborn dreams. But once upon a time, I was just a guy with an unfinished jet on a hangar floor and a wife who wanted more. It had been 16 years since Marissa left. 16 years since she packed up our daughter, Lena, and walked out during the 2009 aerospace budget crash. You're chasing wind, she had said, and wind doesn't pay the mortgage. I was building an experimental vertical jet then. No market plan, no buyer, just an obsession and the last grant we'd ever get. I didn't blame her, not entirely. We were broke. I'd turned down stable jobs, laughed off defense contracts, and poured our life into a machine that couldn't even get certified. She wanted security. I wanted altitude. Now here she was, inviting me to her wedding. I flipped the card over in my hands. Langley. Victor Langley. That name sounded like money. I looked him up. Media conglomerate, tech assets, slick jawline, and a bio that screamed, used to be on CNBC. He ran 5 companies I'd never buy from and 2 I'd sued. Somehow I wasn't surprised. I left the invitation on my desk for 3 days. Thought about tossing it. Thought about showing up just to remind them all who I was now. It wasn't pride. Not entirely. It was curiosity. What kind of woman invites the man she left for being a dreamer to her wedding with a mogul? Lena called on the 4th day. You got it, didn't you? She asked. I did. She sighed. You're going, right? I haven't decided. You should. It's ridiculous, but you should. I could hear her tension, even through the phone. Lena had always been good at neutrality, but I knew this wedding put her in the middle. She still saw Marissa often. Her mom was softer now, I think. Wealth does that to people. But Lena never stopped asking questions about aircraft and funding and wind tunnel tests. That part, the part she got from me, never dimmed. She said I could bring a +1, Lena added. So I'm bringing you. That's not how that works. It is now. I smiled in spite of myself. She had her mother's confidence, but a spark I recognized as my own. I'll think about it. You always think, she said. Maybe it's time you just go. I ended the call and RSVP'd that night. Something twisted in my chest when I hit accept. Not pain. Not anger. Something like recalibration. Like I was finally correcting a long flight path that had drifted off course. Marissa once called me a failed romantic in an engineer's clothing. Maybe she was right. I never did learn how to let things go. But I knew how to land gracefully, even if it meant attending a wedding that never should have been necessary in the first place. The wedding was on a rooftop in downtown San Francisco, the kind of place you book when you want to impress tech investors and scare off anyone who isn't wearing designer shoes. A private elevator ride led to a helipad-sized terrace dressed in glass, drone orbs buzzing overhead like a synchronized ballet, and a string quartet that sounded piped in from some digital playlist curated by an algorithm called Wealth. I stepped out in a charcoal suit custom-tailored in Milan 6 months ago. Not that anyone here would know the difference. That was the irony. Half the people whispering behind their champagne flutes probably thought I worked for someone important. The other half assumed I used to be someone important. Lena found me quickly. She looked beautiful, of course, sleek navy dress, heels too high, hair pinned back like a Vogue cover shoot. I saw Marissa's features in her cheekbones, but the confidence? That was mine. She hugged me, quick and tight. You're already making people stare, she whispered, half smiling. Is that good or bad? Depends on what we want them to think. She looped her arm through mine and pulled me forward into the crowd. Let's introduce you around. I met influencers, venture capitalists, a woman who invented an AI that writes poems about breakfast. Most of them smiled politely, then moved on after one glance at my name tag. Caleb Rowan? Their brows twitched. They didn't know what to make of me. Until someone finally did. Rowan, said a voice behind me, with the forced familiarity of someone who was either bluffing or bluffing well. I turned and found myself face-to-face with a man who looked like he owned a Tesla dealership just for fun. Tanned, square-shouldered, teeth a shade too bright. Victor Langley. He extended a hand, the grip firm but shallow. You must be with the bride's side. I suppose you could say that. Victor, he said, nodding toward himself as if I didn't know. Pleasure. I gave him a slow once-over, smiled slightly. Likewise. There was a flicker of confusion behind his eyes. He didn't recognize me. Not even a hint. Before he could move on, he gestured toward the bar with his glass. Be sure to grab something strong. These rooftop gigs look great on paper, but the air's thin up here. He laughed. You from the industry? I raised an eyebrow. Aviation. He chuckled. No kidding. Worked in it. You could say that. Pilot. Builder. Victor leaned in like he was humoring a waiter. Stick to the marketing side. Much better margin. I smiled with my mouth, not my eyes. So I've heard. Lena cleared her throat gently, stepping between us. Victor, this is my father. Caleb Rowan. He blinked. Just for a second. Then the mask slipped. His smile dropped 2 notches and turned guarded. His eyes flitted to me, then to Lena. You're Caleb, he said slowly, like the name had just clicked into a headline he'd skimmed once, but never read. That's right, I said, letting the silence do its job. I didn't realize, he said. Then, pivoting. Well, great to meet you. He didn't mean it. Please, enjoy the evening. And then he walked off, quickly. Lena waited until he was out of earshot before turning to me. Well, that was fun. He's got strong opinions on margins. She laughed once, short and satisfied. He thought you were a museum piece. That's the thing about people who build nothing. They never look under the hood. The sun dipped lower, casting gold across the skyline. Drone lights adjusted themselves, shifting into a gentle glow like fireflies. Somewhere in the crowd, Marissa was making her way through a circle of editors and gallery owners. I didn't look directly at her. Not yet. The crowd was full of perfect teeth and surface charm. But underneath it all, I could feel it, the ripples. Whispers. The name on my badge wasn't forgotten, just misplaced. Caleb Rowan. That guy from the prototype jet that never flew, right? Right? And that was enough for tonight. I let the air fill my lungs, let the view settle into my chest, and let them wonder. I'd been irrelevant once, but not anymore. By the time the ceremony started, the sun was just low enough to throw everything into golden shimmer. Marissa had chosen sunset for the optics. Warm light, flattering silhouettes, everything filtered through money and filtered wine. I was seated in the far back, behind a hedge wall trimmed like a chessboard. The view of the aisle was obstructed by a decorative arch shaped like an infinity symbol. Intentional, no doubt. I wasn't just at the edge of the party. I was beneath its radar. Lena came by before it started, her hand brushing my shoulder. I tried, she said quietly. I know you did. She told the planner where to put you. I asked her to move you closer, and she said, the optics would be weird. I didn't ask what that meant. I already knew. The music started, some acoustic remix of a popular love song, stripped of its soul. Chairs shifted. Phones tilted. Marissa appeared at the end of the aisle, walking arm in arm with a man I didn't recognize. Probably a family friend. Her dress shimmered like an algorithm's idea of elegance. She looked good. Better than she did when she left, but colder. Her eyes didn't find me. I don't think she even looked. The vows were short. Victor said something about building a life with intention. Marissa spoke about gratitude and second chances. No mention of past marriages. No room for history. It was all about reinvention, about momentum. The crowd clapped politely. And then Victor gave his speech. It was during the reception, after the champagne had been poured, before the lobster course. He stood at the center of the rooftop, flanked by LED floral columns and a drone camera that hovered like a wasp. He tapped the mic and smiled at the crowd like he was pitching a startup. Thank you all for being here, he said. This day isn't just about love, it's about vision. People leaned in. Phones came out. He basked in it. When Marissa and I first met, I told her that legacy isn't built by waiting for the world to notice you. It's built by action, boldness, knowing when to pivot. Applause. She told me once, he continued, that she had loved someone who couldn't move forward. A dreamer. A man who mistook potential for results. Something in my gut twisted. Around me, nobody flinched. They didn't know, but Lena did. I saw her across the room, jaw tight, one hand gripping her napkin. Victor went on. We've all known someone like that, right? Bright minds who get stuck in the clouds, who chase wind instead of building wings. He smiled at Marissa. She smiled back, glass raised. I didn't move. I didn't react. I just listened. Every word logged, every metaphor locked in. Now, here we are, Victor said, surrounded by creators, by doers, by people who know what it means to launch something that matters. So here's to second chances, to real-world innovation, to partnerships that go beyond pipe dreams. The crowd applauded again. Toast lifted, and I, sitting behind the hedge wall, finally understood why I'd been placed back here. I was the ghost of failure, a relic, something she needed to keep hidden so she could present her curated truth. But not everyone bought it. Hell of a speech, a voice said beside me. I turned. Aaron, Marissa's brother. He looked older than I remembered, gray at the temples, but sharp. He sat down beside me, sliding his drink across the little cocktail table we shared. I knew who he meant, Aaron said. Nobody else did. But I did. Figured as much. He's good, Aaron admitted. Polished. Knows how to shape a room. Knows how to rewrite history. Aaron took a slow sip. She told us you flamed out. That you were some dropout who never finished a single project. Said you gave up before anything took off. I turned my head, eyes locked on the skyline. She needed a story that made sense. She also said you still lived in Oregon. That made me laugh. I haven't lived in Oregon in 10 years. Yeah, I figured. He leaned back in his chair, squinting at the pink sky. I Googled you 2 weeks ago, just to be sure. Found a Forbes piece. Took me 20 minutes to realize you'd built that jet they were raving about last spring. I didn't say anything. She never corrected him, Aaron said after a while. Victor, when he called you a dropout at the rehearsal dinner, she just smiled. Let it ride. That one hit harder than I expected. I swallowed it down. She needed me to stay small, I said. Aaron nodded. Yeah, I think she did. The waitstaff moved around us, clearing empty glasses. The air smelled like lavender and grilled salmon. The crowd returned to its rituals, networking in heels, laughing at names they pretended to recognize. I'm not going to tell you what to do, Aaron said, standing. But if you're thinking about leaving early, don't. I looked up at him. Why? Because they think you're nobody. He smirked. And I'd really like to see their faces when they find out they're wrong. Then he patted my shoulder and walked off. I stayed in that chair a long time. Not angry. Not hurt. Just recalibrating. Like a man plotting a new flight path. Quietly. Precisely. And waiting for the wind to shift. It started just after dinner, while the rooftop glowed in that expensive kind of twilight, when the real conversations begin and the masks slip just a little. I was near the terrace bar when I heard Lena's voice, sharper than usual. I already told you, it's not up for debate. I stepped around a hedge wall and saw her standing near the drone display card, arms crossed, cheeks flushed with frustration. Across from her, Victor looked annoyed but composed, the kind of calm that only ever felt like condescension. What's going on? I asked, already knowing. Victor turned toward me with that same media-ready smile. Your daughter wants to waste her summer rebuilding prototypes in a hangar. It's called an internship, Lena snapped. At an R&D facility that's contributed to 5 aerospace patents in the last year. Victor gave her a thin smile, then looked at me like we were colleagues at a conference and he was about to take the mic. Caleb, I respect what you've done. I really do. But let's be honest, Lena's future isn't in propellers and pressure gauges. She's a natural communicator. She could be heading to Stanford Law. I've got a role lined up for her in our public strategy division. I never asked for a role in your empire, Lena shot back. I want to learn how things fly, not pitch things that don't. That one made me smirk. She had my instincts, all right, plus Marissa's fire. Victor sighed and turned to me. I get it. You two share a passion for, well, dreaming. But dreams don't scale. Not like distribution channels and product cycles. You're smart enough to know that by now. He paused, waiting for me to agree. I didn't. She's 21, I said instead. She doesn't need to be packaged and sold before she figures out what she wants. I'm trying to set her up for something real, he replied, the edge creeping into his voice. You know what they say, those who can't build, brand. Interesting, I said slowly. I always thought those who couldn't build bought what they didn't understand. Victor laughed, but it didn't reach his eyes. Come on, Caleb. You had your shot. I'm trying to keep her from wasting hers. That did it. Lena stepped between us. You don't get to talk to him like that. Victor blinked. I'm just being honest. No, you're being arrogant, she snapped. You think success only counts when it fits your version of it. But guess what? He showed up when no one else did. He backed me even when I had no clue what I was doing. He's the reason I believe I can build something. Victor turned to me again, this time with a smirk that felt rehearsed. It's admirable, the way she defends you. But let's be real here. Your story's inspiring in a small-scale kind of way. But it's not sustainable. Eventually, the world demands more than garage projects and poetic speeches about lift. I looked at him and let the silence settle. Then I said, steady and low, the world doesn't demand anything. People like you do. You measure worth in headlines and quarterly reports. I measure it in what gets off the ground and stays there. You're romanticizing failure, Victor said, voice tighter now. You're still chasing that high from the one thing you got right. I smiled. It only takes one good design to change the game. Ask the Wright brothers. Victor shook his head like I was a child who still believed in paper airplanes. You'll see, he said. Eventually, even Lena will grow out of this phase. Lena stared at him like he was a stranger. Then she looked at me. Dad, she said, tell him. I looked Victor in the eye. She's not in a phase. She's in formation. And if you can't see that, then maybe you're the one who needs to grow. Victor scoffed and reached for his wine glass. Well, he muttered, at least she knows who signs the checks now. I raised my own glass, water, not wine, and clinked it against his just loud enough for nearby heads to turn. Not for long, I said quietly. His eyes narrowed, but I just smiled. He still didn't know who I was. But soon he would. The champagne had shifted to whiskey, and the mood to something Messier. The rooftop's pristine symmetry was unraveling, heels off, ties loosened, laughter now a few decibels too high. That's when Victor started getting loud. It began harmless enough, with a boast to a few guests about the media arm of Langley Holdings tripling quarterly returns. Then a dig at legacy companies. Then one at guys stuck in the past. And then, after his third bourbon, it turned personal. I was standing near a heat lamp with Aaron when I heard Victor's voice rise. And you know what's funny? He said, slurring slightly. People worship these old-school engineers, these tinkerers with garage dreams. Like they built the world. A couple of investors chuckled nervously. Victor raised his glass. But they didn't. They failed, and the market moved on. That's what happens. You chase ideas, you get left behind. Unless, of course, he added, now turning toward me, you marry up. The group around him shifted awkwardly. Someone coughed. Someone else looked at their phone. I took a step closer. You sure you want to do this here? Victor laughed, gesturing wildly. What, did I touch a nerve? Come on, Caleb. You're a legend, right? Built that. What was it? VT something? VT-7. Vertical turbine lift jet. First of its kind to integrate rotational thrust adjustment mid-flight. Right, he said, dragging out the word like I was reciting a nursery rhyme. But didn't get certified, did it? Not back then. Exactly. And now you're, what? Retired? Hiding behind that tech incubator you run with government contracts and a hope and prayer prototype? The silence thickened. Marissa looked frozen across the room, her glass halfway to her lips. Lena stood next to her, jaw tight. Aaron muttered, okay, this guy's officially lost the room. Victor wasn't done. Look, Caleb, I respect ambition, but you mistook invention for responsibility. You left your family behind for a machine that never flew. Meanwhile, I built an empire, media, finance, logistics. Real things. Measurable success. I didn't move. Didn't blink. I just waited. You were a dreamer who bailed, Victor finished, eyes glinting. And now you're just a memory with a name badge. I gave it one more beat of silence. Just enough to let the tension rise like turbine pressure. Then I spoke clear, calm. You know that fund your wife's bank manages? I said, looking at him. The one that invests across high-tech ventures and aerospace R&D? Victor blinked. What about it? I seeded that fund. $500 million. Liquid. Now the silence was electric. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned. I moved that capital through a blind trust because I didn't want my name influencing decisions. But hearing all this tonight, I smiled, just a flicker. Makes me think I should pull it. Reallocate it somewhere with vision. Victor's face paled. Marissa dropped her glass. It didn't shatter, it thudded onto the floor like a punctuation mark. You're bluffing, Victor said, voice tight. I looked past him, toward Marissa. Ask your wife. She didn't say a word. I turned back to Victor. I built something out of failure. You build a mirror. It's fragile. Let's see how well it holds up. And with that, I set my drink down and stepped back. No raised voice. No finger pointing. Just silence humming like a jet engine cooling on the tarmac. The party didn't recover. Not really. The DJ tried, played a remix nobody danced to. Waitstaff moved quicker, sensing the shift. Guests peeled away in small groups, whispering. Victor stood there like a man watching his empire flicker. He looked toward Marissa. She didn't meet his eyes. And me? I just watched it unfold like a test flight that had lost control. Calm. Centered. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't the one falling. By the time the reception lights began to dim and the rooftop heaters flickered low, the mood had shifted into something quiet and brittle. Conversations were low and cautious. Glasses clinked like apologies. The elite crowd, once so effortless in their confidence, now avoided eye contact with the groom. I stood near the elevator, coat over my arm, ready to leave. I wasn't angry anymore. Just done. Aaron approached first. He handed me a to-go box with a smirk. Lobster tail and a macaron tower. Thought you might want some edible revenge. I chuckled, taking it. Appreciated. He grew serious. Listen. I talked to Marissa after the blow-up. I didn't ask what she said. I just waited. She told me she never mentioned your name at the investor dinners. Never told Victor who you were. She let him think you were a busted-out hobbyist. Yeah, I said. I figured that much. Aaron hesitated, then added, she said something else too. That maybe she had to make you irrelevant. Because if you weren't a failure, then maybe she was. That landed heavier than I expected. I looked out over the skyline. The air was crisp, quieter now. People rewrite history to survive their own choices, I said softly. I get it. Do you? I nodded. Doesn't mean I forgive it. Aaron tilted his head. Still thinking about pulling the fund? I already started the process, I said. But I'll leave a token. 10 million. Let them call it symbolic. Aaron raised an eyebrow. Why leave anything? I glanced back toward the venue. Because I want the story to end with some dignity. Even if it's not mine. He studied me for a beat, then nodded slowly. You're a bigger man than me. No, I said. Just an older one. As I turned to leave, I heard footsteps. Caleb. Marissa's voice. Soft. Hesitant. I stopped, turned. She was alone now, Victor nowhere in sight. Her heels were off, dangling from one hand. Her hair had come loose, like the weight of the evening had finally pulled everything down. You're leaving? Yeah. She stepped closer. What happened tonight wasn't how I wanted this to go. I didn't respond. She tried again. I didn't think you'd come. I figured you'd throw the invitation away. I almost did. She nodded. You always hated spectacle. And you always loved it. That earned a small, tired smile. I suppose we always were on different runways. I was building something, I said. You were boarding something already built. She looked down. I know. We stood there, still as the night air, the party still flickering weakly behind us. You know, she said finally, I told myself for years that you were just chasing fantasy, that you couldn't commit to anything real. But watching you tonight, hearing what you've built. She stopped herself, looked me in the eye. You were always building something real. I just didn't have the patience to wait for the runway to clear. That one hit differently. I took a breath. You needed safety. I needed risk. That's not a betrayal. Just a misalignment. She stepped closer. Victor and I were separating. I didn't blink. I figured. He didn't want a partner. He wanted a prop. I nodded slowly. You humiliated him, she added. No. He did that to himself? Silence again. Just the wind and the hum of the elevator gears. I wanted to ask you something, she said quietly. Why leave anything in the fund? After what I did, what we both did, why not pull every cent? I considered it for a second. Then I said, because Lena will ask me one day what grace looks like. And I want to have an answer. Her eyes shimmered then, not with tears, but with something harder to name. Maybe recognition. Maybe regret. I turned to go. She didn't try to stop me. Back in the elevator, as the doors closed, I caught one last glimpse of her, barefoot on a rooftop, framed by cold light and a skyline full of things neither of us could rewrite. The past had landed, but I was still in motion. Back home in Seattle, things felt quieter. Not just the weather, though the drizzle hadn't let up in 3 days, but something inside me. Like a pressure drop after a long climb. I wasn't angry anymore. Just strangely light. The kind of calm that comes when you realize you're no longer holding something heavy. I spent the week back in the hangar, fine-tuning a prototype with the team. It wasn't about proving anything, not anymore. It just felt good to be where things made sense. Wires, wings, numbers. I liked how machines didn't pretend. One night, I stayed late. Everyone else had gone home, the echo of their footsteps long gone. I sat at my desk in the corner of the hangar office, surrounded by design sketches and turbine parts. That's when Lena showed up. She knocked twice on the open door, then stepped in without waiting. You got a second? Always, I said, setting my wrench aside. She looked different, not in appearance, but in energy. Her shoulders were squared, but her eyes softer. She sat across from me, tugging at her sleeve like she was nervous. "I've been thinking," she said. "About what Victor said. About what you said." I stayed quiet, giving her room. She inhaled deeply. "I don't want to go back to law school this fall." That took me by surprise. I leaned back slightly. "Okay. I've been working in your lab this summer, and it's the first time in years I've woken up excited about something. I don't want to argue a case someone else wrote. I want to build things. I want to work with flight dynamics and material resistance, and, hell, I want to learn how to weld." I laughed, caught off guard, in the best way. "You want to switch careers?" She nodded. "I want to stay. Work in the shop. Study part-time. Maybe even apply to that aerospace design program next year." I stared at her for a long moment. "You're sure?" "No," she admitted. "But I've never been this curious about anything before. And I think that counts for something." I felt something rise in my chest. Pride, yes, but also something deeper. Legacy. Not the kind you put in a press release. The kind that sits across from you, alive and real and asking for a chance. I nodded slowly. "Then I'll help you. However I can." She exhaled. "I told Mom." That gave me pause. And she didn't fight it. Not even a little. She said, Lena looked down, smiling faintly, "Maybe you're more like your father than I thought." I looked away, swallowing the lump in my throat before it could rise. "She said that?" I asked quietly. She did. The wind outside howled faintly against the hangar doors. The fluorescent lights hummed above us. "Law school can wait," she said. "But this, whatever this is, it's already happening." I stood and pulled a folded blueprint off the wall. One of my old sketches. The VT-7. I handed it to her. "You'll need to learn aerodynamics, load limits, stress fractures, failure testing." She took it with both hands like it was something sacred. "I'm ready," she said. I believed her. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like the storm had passed. Not because I'd won anything, but because Lena saw what I had tried so hard to build and chose to carry it forward. On her terms. Maybe I hadn't lost her mother's respect all those years ago. Maybe I just passed it along in a different form. And maybe that was always the real altitude I'd been chasing. 3 months later, my phone rang while I was reviewing a pitch deck for a hydrogen propulsion startup. I didn't recognize the number, San Francisco area code, but I had a feeling before I even answered. "Caleb Rowan," I said. There was a pause. Then, "Hi, it's Marissa." I leaned back in my chair, staring out the window of my office. The sky was clear, bright. Perfect day for flying. "I wasn't sure you'd pick up," she added. "You got me between prototypes," I said. "What's going on?" She hesitated, then said, "I have a question." "A real one." "Go ahead." "Our bank, Langley First Capital, is hosting a conference this winter. Theme is unconventional innovation." I almost laughed. "That sounds pointed." "It is," she admitted. "Victor started the concept. I took it over after. There it was. No dramatic reveal. Just a casual admission, like it didn't carry the weight of a life split down the middle." "You two separated?" "Officially last month," she said. "But it was over long before that. I just didn't see it." "What changed?" "He never wanted a partner," she said. "He wanted a reflection. And I was tired of pretending I was the right shape." I didn't say anything. Marissa cleared her throat. "The conference. We're looking for a keynote. We've invited tech founders, aerospace disruptors, people who've been through the fire and still built something that mattered." "Sounds like a good list." "You're on it," she said. "Top of it." I blinked. "You're asking me to speak at your bank's event?" "I am." "What about optics?" There was a smile in her voice. "Turns out those matter less than I thought." "And Victor?" "Not involved anymore." I sat with that for a moment. "Look," she added, her voice softer now, "I'm not asking you to do it for me. I'm asking because people should hear how you see the world. Because you've earned the platform. And because I know what it took to get there." "Speaking fee." "We'd usually offer a sizable one," she said, sounding amused. "But I suspect you'll waive it out of some symbolic stubbornness." "You'd be right." She paused again. "So you'll do it?" "I'll do it." There was relief in her silence. Not gratitude, not emotion. Just something loosening. "Thank you," she said finally. I nodded, though she couldn't see it. It's a good theme. Innovation isn't always shiny. Sometimes it starts with broken parts. "I know that now." The line was quiet again, then. "Lena told me you're teaching her CAD modeling. She's a quick study. Better instincts than I had at her age. She's lucky to have you." I smiled faintly. I'm lucky she sees value in what I do. There was a pause. Then, I see it too now. I think I always did. I just couldn't live with what that said about me. I didn't respond right away. We'd said what mattered. See you at the conference, I said. She exhaled. Yeah, see you then. When I hung up, I looked out the window again. The clouds were rolling in now, soft and high like a new layer forming above a settled storm. I wasn't going for applause. I wasn't going for closure. I was going to tell the truth. Because somewhere between the crash and the climb, I learned that legacy wasn't built for those who needed credit. It was built by those who kept showing up. Late one evening, after the hangar lights had gone dark and the team had filtered out into the Seattle drizzle, I stayed behind. Not because anything needed fixing, just because something inside me still needed quiet. I walked to the back corner of the office, where I kept an old upright piano, one I'd hauled in years ago when we signed our first major contract. Nobody else touched it. It wasn't tuned perfectly, and the wood was scratched near the pedals. But it had survived the lean years and the golden ones, same as me. I sat down and lifted the lid. There was a melody I used to play. Just a few bars, something I had written the night Marissa left. Back then, it had no name, just a trailing line of unresolved notes that mirrored the ache I didn't have words for. I began to play it again, slow, deliberate. The key still knew my hands. The room filled with the same soft, wandering chords until I reached the place where I always stopped. This time, I didn't. I let the song carry forward, shaping an ending I had never been able to find. Not a triumphant finish, just a landing. Gentle, honest. When the last note faded, I sat still for a long while. Not sad, not proud, just centered. My phone buzzed on the desk beside me. It was a message from Lena. Mom's on board. Law school can wait. The future's calling. And I want to build it with you. I stared at the screen, letting those words settle. Not because they shocked me, but because they confirmed something I hadn't dared name. This was the legacy. Not the jets or the patents or the conferences. It was her. I stood and walked to the drafting table by the window. On the corkboard above it, pinned between technical charts and old notes, was a photo of Lena at age 10, safety goggles too big for her face, helping me measure sheet metal on a school break. Next to it, I pinned something new, a blueprint. Just a sketch for now, the skeleton of a personal vertical lift design we'd started drafting together last week. Next to that, I placed the photo we'd taken last month, Lena in the lab, hair tied up, grease on her cheek, smiling like she belonged there. Because she did. I stepped back. That was it. Not vindication. Not revenge. Just a quiet, unexpected harmony. A composition finally complete. And this time, it ended exactly the way it was meant to.